Welcome to this deep dive. And
Mhm.
today we're going to be looking into the world of autistic women and the emotional labor they carry.
Yeah.
We've got this really interesting stack of articles and blog posts from Cheap ABA.
Okay.
Now, while the website's name is all about ABA therapy,
Right.
these pieces really branch out way beyond that to all sorts of broader issues that autistic women face.
Yeah, it's more like using the platform to give a voice to a whole spectrum of experiences that
Yeah.
don't really get enough attention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to try to really understand these unique challenges these women face,
Mm,
especially because of societal expectations. And hopefully the listener will walk away with a deeper understanding
for sure.
of this kind of often hidden aspect of neurodiversity.
Yeah.
One of the articles mentioned this idea of spoon theory. Have you heard of that?
Oh, of course, spoon theory. It's such a powerful metaphor for understanding chronic illness,
Right.
including autistic individuals, and really how much energy they have to spend each day. Each spoon represents a unit of energy.
Gotcha.
And just the activities of daily living
Yeah.
can cost multiple spoons, even seemingly simple ones.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So if we connect that with emotional labor,
Hmm.
how does that play out then for autistic women specifically?
Mm-hmm.
The articles were kind of suggesting it's not just about managing feelings, but it's about actively shaping your emotions
Right.
to meet expectations, which sounds pretty hard.
Yeah. And the cost can be high, especially for autistic women.
Yeah.
One article shared this story about a woman who felt like she was constantly performing empathy.
Really?
And it was so draining to try to decipher social cues that just didn't come naturally to her.
Oh, wow.
And then at the same time, she's trying to project this image of being caring and supportive.
That sounds exhausting.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It reminds me of this double bind concept the sources kept mentioning.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's like they're being told to both fit in and be authentic.
Right.
Those seem like opposing ideas.
It is. It's this tightrope walk.
Yeah.
And the cheap ABA pieces really highlight how this double bind manifests in a lot of ways.
Okay.
For example, many autistic women are really aware of subtle facial expressions, body language,
Right.
but interpreting those cues and then responding appropriately, quote unquote,
Yeah.
it takes so much effort.
Wow.
It's not that they lack empathy, it's that the process itself requires a lot of energy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The sources also mention eye contact, that even eye contact can be a form of emotional labor.
Totally.
Can you talk more about that?
Absolutely. For a lot of neurotypical individuals, eye contact is just this natural part of communication.
Right.
But for some autistic women, it can feel intensely intrusive and overwhelming,
Oh, wow.
almost like a physical sensation.
Really?
So the effort to maintain eye contact just to meet those social expectations,
Yeah.
that can drain their energy too.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
It's like they're constantly translating between
Oh.
two different languages,
Yeah.
the neurotypical world and then their own neurodivergent experience.
I love that. That's such a great way to put it.
And that's got to take a toll.
For sure. Yeah.
So let's get into some of these societal expectations.
Okay.
The articles mention some specific expectations placed on women.
Right.
They can be especially burdensome.
Yeah.
What were some of the big ones that stood out?
So one that kept coming up was this pressure to be hyper empathetic and nurturing,
Okay.
almost like an emotional caretaker for everyone.
Right.
And this plays into traditional gender roles.
Yeah.
But for autistic women who might already be struggling with social cues and sensory overload, it can feel like they're being asked to do the impossible, constantly meeting these needs.
It's like they're expected to be these emotional sponges,
Yeah.
absorbing everyone else's feelings, but then suppressing their own.
Mm-hmm.
The sources said this can be especially hard in romantic relationships.
Absolutely. One article shared a quote where an autistic woman described feeling like she was constantly walking on eggshells
Oh, gosh.
in her relationship, just terrified of saying the wrong thing and upsetting her partner.
Wow.
She talked about this immense pressure to mask her true feelings
Yeah.
and constantly anticipate her partner's needs.
That's got to be hard.
It is. It left her feeling totally depleted.
And it seems like this pressure to mask autistic traits
Yeah.
that can lead to a lot of internal conflict, emotional exhaustion.
Yeah, masking is common,
Yeah.
It's a coping mechanism for autistic individuals.
Right.
But it comes at a cost.
Okay.
One article mentioned that autistic women especially feel this pressure to mask their true selves,
What?
to fit in, to avoid judgment.
Right.
They might force themselves to make eye contact,
Yeah.
suppress stimming behaviors,
Oh, wow.
or even adopt this persona that just doesn't feel real.
That's a lot.
All of that takes so much effort
Yeah.
and can lead to feeling isolated and fake.
It's like being forced to live a double life.
Yeah.
It must be draining.
Incredibly draining, yeah,
Yeah.
and isolating.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that masking isn't a one-size-fits-all experience.
Okay.
The cheap ABA sources actually pointed out how the pressure to mask is even more intense
Wow.
for autistic women of color
Right.
who face these intersecting layers of societal expectations and potential discrimination.
It's like the emotional labor they're carrying is made heavier
It is.
with these additional societal pressures.
Exactly. And speaking of societal pressures,
Okay.
the sources highlighted this expectation for women to be the social coordinators.
Oh, right.
The ones who plan events, maintain relationships, keep everyone connected.
Yeah.
For some people, that might be energizing, but for many autistic women, it can be utterly draining.
Oh, absolutely. One article even called it the inevitable workload
Oh, that's perfect.
that often falls on women's shoulders.
Yeah, think about all the mental energy it takes to plan something.
Like coordinating schedules,
Mhm.
anticipating dietary needs, navigating those potential sensory sensitivities,
That is, yeah.
managing the emotional dynamics of the whole group.
Right.
For someone who might already be struggling with social anxiety or sensory overload,
Yeah.
it can feel impossible.
It's like they're expected to be these social butterflies,
Right.
flitting from one interaction to the next, when in reality, it might be taking everything they have just to stay afloat.
Exactly. And then you add the pressure of being emotionally available at all
Oh,
times.
gosh. Yeah.
Society often expects women to be the ones to comfort, offer advice, listen to everyone else's problems, even when they might be struggling themselves.
It's like they're expected to be these bottomless wells of empathy, constantly giving and never receiving.
Such a powerful analogy. And for autistic women who might already be feeling depleted from masking and navigating those social expectations, it's a recipe for burnout. One of the articles mentioned that autistic women are more likely to be diagnosed with anxiety and depression,
Yeah.
but often later in life, like after years of trying to meet these unrealistic expectations.
It's true.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's tragic, and it speaks to the importance of early diagnosis and intervention.
Yeah.
The sooner autistic women can understand their own unique needs, develop coping mechanisms,
Right.
the better they'll be able to face these challenges.
It's not just about individual coping mechanisms, though, is it?
Right.
We also need to address the systemic issues
Yes,
that contribute to this emotional burden.
absolutely.
The sources mention several strategies for creating a more supportive environment. What are some of the key takeaways there?
One important step is open and honest communication.
Okay.
Creating spaces where autistic women feel safe to express their needs
Yeah.
and their limitations without judgment.
So it's about encouraging a dialogue,
Yeah.
not just about autism, but emotional labor in general.
Exactly. Recognizing that everyone has different emotional capacities and needs,
Right.
and respecting those differences.
And challenging those societal expectations
Yes.
that put too much burden on certain groups. One of the sources talked about the importance of redefining strength and success.
That's so important.
Yeah.
We often think strength is about stoicism,
Right.
powering through any challenge, but true strength is recognizing our limitations, asking for support when we need it.
And true success isn't conforming to what society expects.
Right.
It's about living authentically and in a fulfilling way.
The cheap ABA article is really focused on self-awareness and self-acceptance.
Okay.
It's about recognizing your unique strengths and challenges, honoring your needs and boundaries.
That includes self-care.
Oh, absolutely.
The sources mentioned several strategies to help kind of replenish emotional energy.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that resonated with you?
One that stood out was finding joy in activities that are intrinsically rewarding.
Oh.
Could be anything from spending time in nature to pursuing a creative hobby
Right.
to connecting with loved ones
Yeah.
who understand and support you.
It's about finding those things that fill your cup
Yes,
and prioritizing them.
absolutely.
It's about giving yourself permission to recharge
Yeah,
and prioritize your own well-being,
which can be tough.
which can be really tough.
In a culture that values productivity above all else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's also about challenging the idea that asking for help is weak.
totally.
It takes courage to acknowledge our vulnerabilities
It does.
and reach out for help.
And that's where community comes in.
Yeah.
The sources talked about connecting with other autistic individuals, especially women,
Right.
who can offer this shared understanding and validation.
Having that supportive network of people who get it
Yeah.
can make such a difference.
It can. It's about creating spaces where autistic women feel seen, heard, valued for who they are,
Yeah.
not who society expects them to be.
It's about that sense of belonging,
Yeah.
which can be really empowering.
It can be transformative.
And it's not just about finding support.
Right.
It's also about offering support.
Exactly.
Sharing those coping mechanisms and strategies
Yes.
that have worked for you.
It's about creating this ripple effect of empathy and understanding, which can ultimately lead to a more inclusive and accepting world.
But for everyone.
Yeah.
There's real power in that, and knowing you're not alone.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what about for the listener?
Right.
What can they take away from all this, especially if they're not autistic themselves?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think one of the big things is just recognizing that everyone experiences and expresses emotions differently.
Okay.
There's no one right way to be.
Yeah.
And we need to be more accepting of those differences.
So expanding our understanding of what normal looks like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And recognizing that what might seem like a simple interaction for one person could be a huge effort for someone else.
Right.
We have to be more aware of those invisible struggles and create environments where everyone feels safe to be themselves.
How can we do that?
Right.
What are some practical things we can do to be more supportive of autistic women
Okay.
in our lives, both personally and professionally?
Active listening and empathy are so important.
Okay.
Really take the time to understand someone's perspective, even if it's different from your own.
Right.
Put aside any assumptions or judgments you have and be open to learning from their experiences.
Approaching those conversations with curiosity.
Yes.
A willingness to learn rather than just trying to force our own perspectives.
Exactly. And be mindful of the language you use.
Okay.
Avoid making generalizations about autism.
Right.
Or assuming everyone experiences it the same way. Each person is unique.
Right.
Their needs and challenges will vary.
It's about treating each person as an individual,
Yes.
not a stereotype,
Exactly.
and realizing that we all have our own sensitivities and struggles,
Right.
even if they don't look the same.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're unsure about something, it's better to clarify than to make assumptions.
Right.
That could be hurtful.
There's no shame in admitting you don't know something
Right.
and being open to learning.
Yeah.
And I think that's a sign of respect.
It is.
Willingness to connect.
Yeah. And remember, even small gestures of support can make a big difference.
Okay.
A kind word, a listening ear, a willingness to accommodate someone's needs.
Right.
Those can all help to create a more welcoming environment.
It's those small acts of kindness that show someone they're seen and valued.
Exactly. And I think that's a great place to leave our listeners today.
Okay.
This deep dive focused specifically on autistic women and the challenges around emotional labor.
Right.
But I think these lessons have broader implications.
It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility
Yeah.
to create a more inclusive and accepting world
Uh-huh.
where everyone feels safe to be themselves.
A world worth striving for.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope you found it insightful and empowering. Until next time, keep diving deeper and keep learning.